I tell people my sister moved out west. You're a science teacher. Your husband, he renovates houses. You're thinking about moving, but you're gonna wait until the interest rates go down.
That's not my story. I made mistakes. And a lot of enemies.
His call sign's Taskmaster. He controls the Red Room. They're manipulative, fully conscious, but no choices.
I should have come back for you. How many others are there?
Enough.
I'm done running.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and today I have a movie review for you for the Marvel Studios film Black Widow. This week we got Thunderbolts releasing in theaters, so I thought it was the perfect time to tackle this film. But before we go any further, I want to ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live on this channel. If you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's get into the plot. Natasha Romanoff, also known as Black Widow, confronts the darker parts of her ledger when a dangerous conspiracy with ties to her past arises. Pursued by a force that will stop at nothing to bring her down, Natasha must deal with her history as a spy and the broken relationships left in her wake long before she became an Avenger. What was good about this movie? Well, a little background on this film. This was a film that probably should have been released in Phase 3. It's kind of odd that it came out when it did, especially for when this film takes place in the MCU timeline. It takes place just a couple of days after the events of Captain America Civil War. So it's one of those that should have been released probably immediately after Captain America Civil War had come out in theaters. And this film should have been released in the year 2016 or 2017. And it's really odd that it came out, after, spoiler alert, came out after the fate of Black Widow in Avengers Endgame. So we have a character that we already know the end of. We already know that this is a character who has died, and now we're going to revisit this character, and in a weird, kind of odd state in their life. I was thinking for a Black Widow film, we may have done the origins of this character, how she defected from the Red Room and then going into S.H.I.E.L.D., how she came into contact with characters like Hawkeye and Nick Fury and Agent Coulson. That's not the story here. We get a little bit of history with this character in what she did in Budapest, or how she would say it, Budapestan, which is probably the correct way to say that anyway. But we get a little bit of backstory on her and how she became a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then we, of course, know how she became an Avenger. But that's not the story that was told here. I think there's a unique story that they did tell here, and one that I think was told pretty well for the most part. I have some stuff to say in the mixed and negative aspects of this, but I think this is a project that was, while very late, was still very nice to watch. This was also a project that was supposed to come out in the year 2020, 1 year after Endgame, but of course we know what happened to the state of the world in March of 2020. Everything was shut down, but a bunch of films, due to the COVID outbreak, were pushed into the following years, and Black Widow got pushed several times. It was supposed to initially come out in May of 2020, then it got pushed to, I think, July, and then I think it got pushed to like November, and then it got pushed again to like May of 2021, and then they pushed it one more time to, I believe, July of 2021. It just got pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and I understand why, and eventually they just had to release it because they were going to lose out on a lot of money for this film, and they did lose out on some money for this film, and some of that's to do to the nature of how they released it. They released this film not only in theaters, but it also was released on the same day on Disney Plus for purchase, but it was released day and date on Disney Plus as well, so people could watch it at home. Not the smartest move on Disney's part, and this was during the Chapek era, not the Iger era. So Chapek was running things. Bob Chapek was the CEO of Disney at the time, not making the best decisions regarding releasing films, and kind of made a really dark impact on the entire MCU as a whole, but that's a video for another time. But anyway, kind of really sabotaged the release of Black Widow. Really got into it with Scarlett Johansson. There's a whole thing about her suing Disney and her not getting what she was due in the contract she signed for this film. A lot of stuff going on about, you know, money she was losing out on. And again, that's probably a conversation for another video as well. There's a lot of stuff surrounding the release of this film that is really interesting. So I would recommend go do some digging on how this film was released. That's a whole interesting story unto itself. And I'd love to see some kind of like short documentary made on the whole story behind this. It's really curious and really interesting how it all played out. All that stuff aside, the film as it is a pretty interesting film. And as it starts, I thought we were going to be getting one of the best MCU films ever at the start of this movie, because the opening of this movie is so unique, going into this one specific part of Black Widow's life, of Natasha's life, and how she kind of grew up in this almost Americans, like the FX series, The Americans style of these undercover Russian operatives living amongst people in the state of Ohio in the United States. They portray themselves as Americans, as this true American family, and they're compromised, or rather their mission is complete. Alexei has completed everything, and then they have to return to their old lives as Russian operatives. And it's a little easier for Alexei to do it. It's a little easier for Melina to do it, but not so much for Yelena and Natasha. They are caught up in the Red Room program, a program that uses women as weapons. There's a lot of dark stuff happening here, especially with the character of Yelena, a little girl who doesn't want to dive into this life. She wants to live the life of a true American girl. She wants to live the life of the simple life. She doesn't want to go into this dark spy world, and it's so heartbreaking when the family is torn apart at the opening of this film. And then we catch up into the present moment of this film. Not really the present, it'd be the past for us, but the present for when this film is taking place. Black Widow is, of course, now she's on the run from Thaddeus Ross and the US government for going against Tony Stark and his team of Avengers, and she is now in violation of the Sokovia Accords, so she is now a fugitive of the law, set to be imprisoned on the raft. And a little note for you, this was William Hurt's last performance as Thaddeus Ross. Unfortunately, that actor has passed away. He's been since replaced and recast by Harrison Ford, who I thought did a pretty good job as the character in Captain America Brave New World. This was his last performance. This was William Hurt's last performance as Thaddeus Ross. Always does really great as this character, brings certain depths to this character. Every time he appeared and reappeared as this character, he got to do even more meaty stuff with the role that he didn't necessarily get to do in The Incredible Hulk. And when he came back in Civil War, he got to do some new stuff. And when he came back here, he got to do even more with the character. And so he was always eating this role up. And it's always going to be a question for me is what he was going to be able to do with the role when he eventually did get to Brave New World, because he wanted to continue with this character, and it's kind of sad that that just didn't happen for him. But it's always been great to see William Hurt in this role, and he was great in this film for what little we got to see of him. Natasha, she's on the run, and the whole story that unfolds here is a story of family, a broken family that is healed, story of regret and loss, and a lot of really great stuff that I think was perfect to capture, was perfect to visit in the character of Natasha. And Florence Pugh is introduced as Yelena in this film, and she is wonderful. One of the best new entries, best new characters that has been introduced into the MCU. I love this character. I love that she's been able to come back. She came back in the Hawkeye series for a little bit, and she's coming back in the Thunderbolts this week. So it's been really cool to see this character continue on, and we get to see new stuff from her. What I saw in the trailer for the Thunderbolts, there's a lot of promise for this character to continue on, and she's going to continue into the Avengers, Doomsday, and probably Secret Wars, and multiple projects for years to come. So that's really exciting that we get more from this character. David Harbour being introduced as Alexei Shostakov, the Red Guardian. I love the odd feud that he has with Captain America, because as they point out many times, he shouldn't have interacted with Captain America. So my question is this all in his head? Is he just making it up? Or did he interact with Isaiah Bradley? Did he interact with Bucky and just assume that was Captain America? What was the interaction he had with this American super soldier? I would love to know what that story was. Is it always going to be left kind of in the dark, or are we finally going to get the answer to that? Either be it in Thunderbolts or either be it in one of the Avengers films. I would love to know, when is he going to have that interaction with Captain America again? I would love to know what that story is. It's so intriguing. But he's also one of the best additions to the MCU in the last couple of years. I love this character. So Yelena, Red Guardian, they were great additions to the cast, and they helped to elevate the story in a way that was both, funny at times, but also very heartfelt. They're characters that are not used specifically for comic relief. Red Guardian Alexi's a little bit more comic relief than everybody else, but he also has a lot of depth to him. You see the regret that he has for what he kind of pushed his adopted daughters into while he wanted them to become the best of the best and all of the assassins and all of the Black Widows. He also has a regret that he had to push them so hard into that life and wishes that he could have given them a more truthful life, a simpler life. And so the family dynamic in this film, even the stuff with Melina, the family dynamic is the best part about the Black Widow movie and is the best material in this entire story. There's a lot of stuff in the mixed and negative, but that's the best aspect of it and is some of the deepest stuff that we've gotten in all of the MCU. When we have those quiet moments when they're sitting at the dinner table and Yelena's talking about, although she knew it was fake, it was real to her. This whole thing is as close to a family as she's ever had. She doesn't want them to trash on that memory. That was a good memory for her. That's what she latches onto, and it's what she cherishes the most. And she wants to remember the good parts of her life, not all the dark and dastardly stuff that she's had to do as a Black Widow assassin. Some of the deepest material we've gotten in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. I would love for them to do more stuff like this, and occasionally they do. And from what I'm hearing, Thunderbolts does a lot of this stuff as well. So I'm excited for that, and I hope that continues in a lot of these projects going forward, because it's when we do that stuff, it brings these characters that are on this such grand, almost godlike scale, brings them down to earth, brings them down to our level, and makes us be able to relate to characters like this. We need to do more stuff like this. I hope Marvel does more stuff like that with their characters going forward. Some of the best stuff in all of the MCU. This was a fun spy thriller for the most part. Definitely not as good as Captain America the Winter Soldier, but was still pretty entertaining and pretty thrilling. Some cool car chases, a lot of cool action sequences there at the beginning of the film. There's a lot of interesting stuff with the stunt work, so that was really cool and very entertaining. I don't have anything else in the good. Let's just move on to the mixed aspects of Black Widow. All right, so what was mixed about Black Widow? Well, the first thing is we may never get a Black Widow sequel. I would love to get another story with Natasha. There's still room to do that within the series. You know, we did this film as a prequel. We could do another Black Widow movie set either between now and when the events of Infinity War happen, or in that 5-year time period. We could finally visit that 5-year period when everybody was gone during the blip between Infinity War and Endgame. So I would love to maybe visit that time period with the character. That'd be pretty interesting. Or just get a sequel with the Yelena character. Maybe we'll do that as well, but I don't really see this series continuing, and that's the frustration with a lot of the Phase 4 and Phase 5 projects, as we keep introducing new franchises, and while this is a character that's existed for a while, the Black Widow franchise or series hasn't existed until this film. We keep introducing things in one go. The Black Widow film, Eternals, Shang-Chi, Disney Plus, it's Moon Knight, or She-Hulk, or Hawkeye, or Miss Marvel. They keep introducing so much stuff, so many characters, and so many new franchises, but there's no continuation and there's no follow-up with these characters and with these series. And that's the frustration with Phases 4 and 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is there's no true follow-up with anything that they've established here. And so that kind of takes the juice and takes the momentum out of these projects, is then when they finally do a follow-up, you're not really as excited for these characters as you would have been before. Like Thunderbolts. I'm still excited for Thunderbolts, but I think that project would have worked better if it came out a little sooner in the timeline, maybe like a year or two after Black Widow, and not 4 years after Black Widow. So that's a frustration with how the whole MCU has been formatted over the last couple of years. Another thing that was mixed, some people will say bad, but for me was mixed, was the visual effects in this film. You can really see the cracks in the visual effects at Marvel at this time. I think they've started to right the ship a little bit over the last film or two, but they were getting very cheap in these, $200, $300 million projects. They were getting a little cheap because they were also rushing the VFX houses. They were rushing the VFX artists to get these projects out on time. And Black Widow, although COVID kind of surrounded this project, they had an ample amount of time to get the visual effects right for this film. And so you can see that the budget didn't necessarily go to the visual effects. They didn't give the artists enough time to do proper visual effects. Oftentimes they would do reshoots last minute, and then they would have to rush in new visual effects for those reshot scenes. And so the visual effects houses they didn't get enough time. The artists didn't get enough time. And as we know, were treated pretty poorly by Marvel Studios when it came time to creating these assets and creating these projects. And it's unfortunate that that's how all of this played out. So sometimes the visual effects do look a little lackluster and a little iffy at best. And that's all I got in the mix. Let's move on to what was bad about Black Widow. All right, what was bad about Black Widow? Well, what was bad was the villain. Man, a so lackluster villain. So we start with Dreykov. Dreykov was, well, for one thing, they wasted the actor Ray Winstone in the role of Dreykov, and just a character that, while was maybe an interesting villain on the surface, really doesn't work overall throughout the entire plot, and is not really seen throughout the plot of the film very much either. You don't really feel his presence clouding the plot. He doesn't really feel like he's much of a threat at all. You feel more the threat of the Red Room, not so much the threat of Dreykov. Even though Dreykov's running the Red Room, you feel more the threat of an entity and not so much the threat of a person. Kind of a joke of a villain when he's finally defeated. This is a guy who has no powers, no abilities, and is just using people as tools for his own gain. He's not really that threatening. He's not really that captivating. And this is just a villain that most people have forgotten and has fallen into the trap of Marvel villains as a villain that you don't remember. I didn't really think about him and didn't remember him until I revisited this film, and then I forgot about him again until I went and did this review. A character that just is not as captivating and doesn't really work as a threatening villain. And then they did all the stuff they did with Taskmaster, a character in the comics that is so much more interesting than what they did in this film. They're going to try to maybe make this character a little bit more interesting in the Thunderbolts, and I'm surprised that this character is coming back in Thunderbolts. However, I believe there's not a great end for this character, and I think Taskmaster might be the first to go. We'll see how that plays out. That's my theory, but I don't think Taskmaster has a great end coming for them in Thunderbolts. A character that was truly wasted, and a character that was so twisted and changed from how they are in the comics, and not in an interesting way. Really baffling what they did with this character, and at the end of the day, shouldn't have even used the character Taskmaster. Maybe saved this character for something a little bit better down the road. A character that has a lot of depth to them in the comics, but when it came to the reveal of what they did with this character, the fact that they're just used, they're just a tool by somebody else, there's no agency to this character at all, literally no agency to her. I don't care that they gender bent the character and changed the gender of the character. It's just the fact that this is a character that has no agency and no true characteristics to them. They're just an object, an obstacle in the way of Black Widow. A character that was very lackluster at the end of all this. So the villain aspect of this film is the worst aspect of this film. I mean, the whole final climactic part of this movie just kind of fell apart. And then the fact that also Black Widow just kind of gets away from the US government. She goes and turns herself in, but then like 2 weeks later, she's out and she's on her way to go find Steve and Sam. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense how all that, when she was on the run from the US government for the entire film, and then at the end of the movie, oh, no, everything's fine. No, we're okay. It was just a misunderstanding. I don't think that that really worked for me at all. So the ending kind of fell apart. Then we had that little tag where Black Widow, now she has her look that she has in Avengers Infinity War. She's off to go find Sam and Steve. I also think that that scene kind of took the wind out of the ending. At the very least, that scene should have been saved for a mid or post-credits scene. And the fact that that's where they chose to end the film was very odd. In the pacing, it didn't really work for me. And the whole ending kind of felt just very rushed and last minute, like they kind of forgot that they had to end this film. So that's where the bad kind of comes in for me. This was a fine film overall, but that's where it just didn't really work. A pretty good MCU film overall. I think I like it more than most, but not as good as I was hoping it would be. Not as good as it started. The movie started pretty strong, but it ended very weak. So once we start the third act of the film, the third act is where everything really falls apart, and it's really frustrating that it feels like they had to kind of rush everything to the end once we get to the climax of the film. And that's kind of how the Disney Plus shows went as well, at least for a long while, where you kind of feel like you're on a strong start and then you have to rush everything to its end in the finale, and you get that here in this movie as well. And it's a movie that also had ample amounts of time to get it right, and I feel like for about 75% of this film was done pretty tactfully, was done with a vision, and then the last 25% was just done by a committee, was done by the Marvel executives, was not done by the director Kate Shortland. They don't feel any authorship over the end of this film. It just feels like it was all done by the studio. That's where this film really does fall apart, and the unfortunate stuff that went into the release of this film, the distribution of this film, all the stuff that went on between Disney and Scarlett Johansson, and the damaged relationship that was there. They may have a repaired relationship now, but it was damaged for a time, and so it's unfortunate how this whole film kind of came about. I love that we did eventually get a Black Widow film, and I hope that we do get more. I think this is a character that does work as a lead of her own series. I would love to get more movies in the Black Widow franchise. I don't know if we will. Maybe we will. I hope we do. But this film, it's good for the most part, but it's also very sloppy, very messy. lazy, the villains don't work, it is a little lackluster at times, the visual effects are a little off, a little iffy. You see the cracks and how much they were pushing the visual effects artists to get these films out on schedule. There's just a lot of problematic stuff that surrounds this movie. A movie that isn't bad, but could have been better. If I'm going to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 3.5 out of 5 or a B- on the letter scale. A good movie, but not a great movie. There's a lot of mess when this film comes to its climactic moment, and that's where the problems in this film really do lie. A film that started strong, but just lost all of its momentum once we got to the climax. I hate that about this movie. I really do enjoy this movie overall, but it does have a lot of problems and is one of the weaker films in the entire run of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you've seen Black Widow, I would love to hear your thoughts though. Go down in the comment section and let me know what you thought of this film. I'd love to hear from you. Before you go, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out. I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.